Yo, what's good, family? What's going on? It's your boy T coming back at y'all again with another installment. Today's topic, we're gonna be going into a part two of socialism. Is socialism good? Now, if you haven't seen my previous video on is socialism good, I advise you go back to check that out. Then you catch up with the rest of us and see what we up to now, and then resume the lesson. So I'll give y'all a little time to cut the video, go back and check that video, then come back and see what we got going on here. But now pursuing to the topic, socialism good. Now what I want to do is I want to start off as I usually do by breaking down these words, and I want to just give a little refresher of what socialism is. So now socialism, social denoting community, public, society. Excuse me. Now, ism means pertaining to. So now, the word socialism means to pertain to the people. Pertain to the people as a collective, as a community. Excuse me. Now, by definition, socialism, a political and economic theory of social organization which advocates that the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community as a whole. Now, right here, where it says community as a whole, that's in reference to government, because in America, we are a constitutional federal republic. We elect representatives to execute our power. So, as a community, as a community as a whole, or the community as a whole, whenever you see phrases like that, that's in reference to government. Now, let's continue reading on. Policy or practice based on the political and economic theory of socialism. Also, in Marxist theory, because socialism is a Marxist theory. In Marxist theory, a transitional social state between the overthrow of capitalism and the realization of communism. Alright, cool. So now we got a little refresher, on what socialism is. So now, is socialism good? Because we hear about socialism a lot in our country, especially in the past few years. And a lot of people are advocating for this order. You have a lot of politicians pushing the issue. They on TV openly saying, we need more democratic socialism. Sorry. So now some of the things that they promise, that sounds real good. The free college tuition, healthcare, health insurance, minimum wage, redistribution of wealth, green energy, just to name a few. Now, they also speak of another thing, which is high taxation. Now, the high taxation, they tell you that, the rich is going to pay their fair share. We're trying to, as they say, we're trying to make a system of a system where we redistribute the wealth to the people who need it. All of these things sound good. We're getting a minimum wage, but that high taxes, right? The taxes, will the taxation be enough to fund free healthcare for all, free college for all? What about this green energy? How expensive will that be? Now, these politicians, they know that taxes will not cover all of these things that they're offering for free. So what is it that they're cleaving on to? I'll tell you. That's the Federal Reserve. Now, what is the Federal Reserve? The Federal Reserve of our country would have to be the central bank. Now, what is a central bank? Now, I have to say, a video on the central bank would be very lengthy, and I will touch that in the future. But for now, I'll just give y'all a little brief understanding of what the Federal Reserve is. So just grab a definition. Now, central bank. As I said, the Federal Reserve is a central bank. A central bank, reserve bank, or monetary authority is an institution that manages the currency and monetary policies or policy of a state or formal monetary union. Now, our country, America, the United States, we are a union of states. So we clearly fit this definition. Now, let's continue on. And oversees their commercial banking system. So now, the central bank is an institution that manage our money and our policies on money, and they oversee commercial banking. So commercial banking would be like, for example, your T's, your Chase, your a Bank of America, all these banks that you walk up and down the street and you see those, you got a bank account there. That's what this is talking about. The central bank control those. So now let's continue. In contrast to a commercial bank, like for example as TD, a central bank possesses a monopoly on increasing the monetary base in a financial crisis. So now what is that talking about? A central bank can basically print up money to help out a country that's in a financial crisis. Now, you can continue reading on with this and learn about it on your own. As I said, in the future, I'll do a more in depth video about central banks or Federal Reserve banks. Now, question, as I said, the central banks, they manage the currency and monetary policy of a country, and they could print money to help save them from a financial crisis. So now, let's throw socialism in the mix. One thing I actually forgot to mention is that in order for a nation to receive money from this central bank, we must actually get authorization or signature from our president. Now, I have to make a quick disclaimer on my own behalf. This is just coming from me personally because there's a lot of naysayers, a lot of back and forth about the whole process or about even having a central bank in the beginning to begin with. Now, me personally, I genuinely believe that central banks are actually necessary for any country, but not to be abused by that country. Now, some might disagree, and that's fine. They have all reason to. But my thing is, we need some form of centralization. Why? For the public sector industries. For example, our states, we pay taxes. We pay state and federal taxes. Now, these taxes are used to fund, as I said, public sector industries. So now, who is going to oversee all of these things if we have a union of states? Are we going to elect a specific state, or do we have some type of a middleman? That's where the central bank comes in. The central bank or the middleman, you know, they, as it reads, manages the currency and monetary policies. So we figure out how to allocate our funds, be it law enforcement, military, healthcare or health insurance, government funded hospitals, public schools, libraries. You know, we need a central plan for certain types of infrastructure, like roads, bridges, transportation, well, certain types of transportation and utilities. Those are things I'm more than sure most people can agree no single entity should control. That should be something controlled by the community as a whole or the government, the people we elect to represent us. Now, what exactly would be the system of a socialist in power? How would the country be if we had a socialist president authorizing the use of the Federal Reserve? What would this be called? Now, I'm more than sure some of you probably heard the term before, maybe not, but there's something called planned economy or central planned economy, hence the word. Now, socialists believe in this method of a planned economy. If you see my previous video on what is Marxism, you will understand how Marx viewed the labor theory of value. So now from this labor theory of value, did socialism form their economic plans, which is central planning. Now I got a little article here for you guys. Grabbed up the definition of central planning, economicshelp.org. I want to read a little bit of this for you guys, right? So now, what is a central planned economy? Now, definition. A centrally planned a centrally planned economy is an economy where the decisions on what to produce, how to produce, and for whom are taken by the government in a centrally managed bureaucracy. Central planning is also referred to as a command economy or communist economy. Now, in this little image, they give you a few, examples. Like I said, you guys could check this out on your own time, or if you want to pause the video and read those, you could go ahead and do that. But I'm trying to just, save time here. Now, jumping ahead. With central planning, the theory is that the government will take ownership of the means of production and run the economy in the interest of the workers. Now, think about that. That's what this is talking about. When the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community as a whole. This is when the community does that. When the government owns the means of production. The theoretical basis of a planned economy stems from the work of Karl Marx. So, in theory or theoretically, a planned or central planned economy is Marxism. So let's jump ahead, a little insert from Karl Marx, the letter. It's the letter to Otto von Boniek, 1890. You can read that. I'm gonna just jump ahead though. In theory, a centrally planned economy can overcome market failure and achieve equality of distribution. Supporters of centrally planned economy argue that when economy decisions are left to the free market, monopolies emerge to exploit consumers. Now, again, if you was watching my previous video on Marxism, you would kind of already understand where they're going with this. Furthermore, the capitalists those who own private property can earn money through exploiting the labors of others. A centrally planned economy allows a fair distribution to all and not just the capitalist class. All right, I'm gonna stop there. So now, what exactly are they getting at? Now, to put it in simple terms, as it reads, they don't want private ownership. Whenever you see capitalists or capitalism, that's private ownership, private property. They want things to be owned by the government so we can have an even distribution of wealth. So now, how does this system actually pan out? Like, do we really need to give the government complete ownership of the means of production so that our economy could work in our best interests? Like, should we have other options or the ability to choose? Like, for example, private schools choose better health insurance or private hospitals for better service? How do we do that if How do we do that if the government owns the means of production? Everything would be public. Will government control goods and services? What about like supermarkets and things of that nature? Prices of goods. How will all of this high taxation and regulation affect businesses and business growth? Well, I'll show you how that happens. What I have next is a little video I want you guys to check out. Okay, first I want to start this part off by letting y'all know where this video comes from. Now, As you can see, the channel, you guys should actually subscribe to this channel as I am, because these guys, they do some fabulous work over there. And as you can see, it was edited by, you know, um, get a little bit of information on where his information come from, his bibliography of sources, and other things of that nature pertaining to his page and the guys that he work with, things that he do. When you could just press pause and check this out. But I had to do a little disclaimer before I showed this part of the video. Okay, now to our video. Now, here we start off with an economic crisis. As I said, you guys should check this video out. A lot of good information. But what I'm going to do is throw my own little spin on it. Now, my answer to his question would be Marxism. So let me explain. Now, if we have a socialist government system, how would they operate, or what would they do during a financial crisis? Well, the answer, as we previously said, central planning. Now, a part of central planning would consist of a mass bailout. One of the ideologies of a central planned economy is inefficient firms protected, firms not allowed to fail. So, of course, they would instantly begin to pump out money from the central bank in order to keep failing businesses afloat. Also, they would give money to the banks and lower interest rates to basically encourage investors and entrepreneurs to take out loans. Not only do they do this, but they also, as we all know, pump money and just distribute it amongst the people. This process is called the stimulus. The stimulus, theoretically, it creates false demand. Free money or free credits become awarded to the consumer or the people. What they do in turn is splurge due to low interest rates. There's no need to necessarily place your money inside of a bank because the interest rates are low. I mean, you'll probably use a bank for its services, but for investments and saving accounts, not a lot of people are doing that, especially during the financial crisis. Also, they're not necessarily investing in business because of the financial crisis. So usually what they do is just spend it. We have many politicians that promote just spending the money also. Now, when the consumer spends, the false demand is from the false demand is from people buying things that they want majority of the time versus need. I mean, if people didn't have the extra money, they wouldn't necessarily spend money recklessly. So they spend their money on things that they want most of the time and not necessarily need. Now, this false demand sends false analysis to the businesses in the private and public sector, and also to the investors, entrepreneurs, and business owners. So what they do is they try to expand to meet this demand, this artificially created demand. But because we are coming out of a financial crisis and other things of that nature, they need more money to expand than they actually have. So what they do is they take out loans from the bank. Now, when they take out these loans from the loans from the bank come with interest. Now, in order for the investors to pay off this interest, what they have to do is raise the prices of goods so that they can pay off this interest. This system is what we call inflation. Now, as I said before, I'll make a more in-depth video about what inflation is, but what I will say is that inflation is caused by debt accumulation, the accumulation of debt. Now, as you watch this video or this
with industries like
oh, sorry. Now, if you watch this portion of the video, you'll start to understand how this debt accumulation occurs and how it actually affects us, and especially the overly expansion of industries to produce goods.
with industries like the steel industry or the farming industry or the housing industry boosted by cheap credit and easy money. Now, if time stopped here, everything would be great. Lower interest rates caused a spike in consumer spending, which is now being met by the capital goods industries. Unfortunately, time does not stand still. The consumer has either spent all of their savings or is now paying interest on the debts they got into yesterday during the spending spree, or is still trying to invest despite the low interest rates. Either way, they're not spending today like they were yesterday. This then causes demand to fall in the consumer sector, which then signals to the capital goods industries that demand has fallen. So the capital goods industries are now in trouble. They've overexpanded themselves to meet a demand which was only there temporarily. But they have the added cost of having expanded their business, and now they have debts to pay off. Worse, they can't afford to pay them off because nobody's buying their goods, because the demand that was artificially created in the first place, it doesn't exist, right? Basically, they're in a mess. They're in a bubble, and the bubble looks like it's about to pop as they're struggling to pay off their debts. Now, there's two options here. The devil's at the crossroads. The state can either let the bubble pop, let the recession happen, or keep printing currency and lowering interest rates to keep the boom in the capital goods industries going.
Now, real quick, what I want to say though is, as I said, we're focusing on what a planned economy would be. So what the socialists would do is they would keep pumping money without a question. They're going to keep pumping money. They're going to keep printing up currency. They're going to keep giving the consumer money. That's going to keep creating what we call inflation, the the debt accumulation. And who is all this debt being paid to? Who it falls down on the consumer, because in order for the investor to pay back on all the interest rate loans, what they have to do is raise prices on their goods and services. So you get stuck paying more, more, more. As long as you're getting pumped money, the interest rate is going higher.
If they let it pop, the capital goods industries will have to cut back or go out of business, resulting in unemployment and social unrest, and we have a recession. This looks bad for the government, so normally they choose to keep inflating the currency supply and lowering interest rates.
Using the Marxist labor theory of value. Now, again, I'll go deeper into the Marxist labor theory of value in the future, but the concept is based upon, as we said previously, or if you seen my What is a Marxist video, or What is Marxism, sorry. If you see my What is Marxism video, you would know a little something about the labor theory of value that Marx had. Now, the redistribution of wealth, because companies can't fail, neither can the people, so they'll continue to print the currency, even though it's coming from the central bank. Now, as I said, I'll make a video in the future about the central bank, but the central bank, it creates this money that it prints out of thin air. It just types it up on the computer. Seriously, it just types it up on a computer the same way you go on your phone and go on your calculator app and just start typing numbers. That's how the central bank comes up with this currency that it produces.
Lowering rates will once again give the consumer more breathing room. They'll have less to pay on their credit cards and mortgages, will be able to borrow more currency, and be able to spend above their means again. Any savings that survived the first batch of inflation and lowered interest rates will now have even less reason to be saved. All this encouragement to spend will stimulate an artificial spending spree. And once again, this boosts demand, which then signals to entrepreneurs and investors that they should, once again, invest in capital goods industries. Printing currency allows them to pump extra cash into the industries, keeping them propped up in an ever-inflating debt bubble. And the same thing happens over and over. The consumer stops spending, the capital goods industries get into trouble, the state and the banks bail them out, but over time, the consumer gradually loses their purchasing power through all the debt accumulation and the fact that the capital goods industries are making things that they either don't want or are too expensive to buy, such as housing. This is why, during the boom years, the consumer sees their living standards gradually coming down, through no fault of their own, even if they lived frugally. Their purchasing power is gradually robbed from them, and it ends up in the hands of the state and the central banks. Yes, the boom years are bad for the consumer, the average guy on the street.
So now, what did we just see here? This is the system that creates what's called hyperinflation. Because some people would say, what's wrong with continually just printing money if they got it? But like I said, this money comes from nowhere. As I said, one of these days in the future, I will do a video on the central bank and the Federal Reserve. But just to give a little more insight, money used to be redeemable in gold. Now, if you look at every dollar, it's a Federal Reserve note. It's just legal tender. It's a representation of debt. That's what money is. So, like I said, I'll do a video in the future about that. But as long as they continue to print this currency, the banks have to put interest on it. And then when they give it to the investor have to figure out a way to make some type of money so that they can pay the interest rates. So they have to raise the prices of their goods. The system of inflation will continue to raise the prices of living standards overall, as it says. And then we, the consumer, our spending power gets smaller and smaller. As you've seen from the beginning of the video, this little image was a little bigger than that. You're not bugging right now. That's exactly what you're seeing. Our spending power gets smaller and smaller. And we enter a realm of hyperinflation. So now what is hyperinflation? Hyperinflation in economics. Hyperinflation is very high and typically accelerating inflation. As we said, we'll continue to keep pumping, pumping, pumping. So the more loans, the more debt accumulation. So the faster we will see inflation. That will be hyperinflation. Now, it quickly erodes the real value of the local currency as the prices of goods increase. Now, as it says, it quickly erodes the value of local currency as the prices of all goods increase. Now, let's continue on. This causes people to minimize their holdings in that currency as they usually switch to a more stable foreign currencies. In recent history, often the US dollar. So now, when we understand this, we see that usually people turn their money into the USD, the US dollar. But right now, we have been going through so many economic crises, we have to figure out what will stabilize our dollar. Now, this will be another topic in the future. I'll give you a few hints, and it has a little bit to do with the form of currency. Are we going to continue to have paper dollars, or will it be something else? But all of that is already within its design. But now, what is the inflation rate right now? That should be the question because, you know, there's a lot of politicians today and they advocate for socialism and they want, as we just seen, they want to create a system of stimulus, but this only furthers inflation. So, what is our current inflation rate? Now, right here, as you can see, the US inflation calculator, usinflationcalculator.com. Right now, as you can see, the US inflation calculator, right now, our inflation rate, as they say, is 1.2%. Now, this calculator is designed to show the actual changes of value due to inflation. Now, this right here, it says zero because I haven't actually inserted anything yet. So now, according to the inflation calculator, if in 2000 I purchase an item for $1, then in 2020, which is 20 years later, that same item would cost, according to the cumulative rate of inflation, pardon me, it's about 51.2% right now. As it reads, if in 2000 I purchase an item for $1, then in 2020 that same item will cost, and let's see, well, it says 151. So we have the 51.2% increase. Now, some people will look at that and say it's only 50 cents. You know, what big of a deal is that? You got an extra 50 cents instead of paying $1 in the corner store for a, a water or some bag of chips. It's $1.50 now. A big deal. It's not that big of a deal. But that's because this is only $1. How about we use a higher amount of money to cumulative rate of inflation, which is about 51.2%. So let's just raise this from $1 to $10. So now, if in 2000 I purchase an item for $10, then in 2020 that same item will cost $15. Now we're starting to see a bigger difference when it comes to this whole inflation thing. So what about if I spent $1,000? We have a whole added $500. So what this is saying, in the year 2000, you could have bought something for $1,000, but today in 2020, you would be spending 1,500 to get that same exact item. This is not good. At what rate would things cost in the next, let's say, 20 years? What about the next 50 years? How many of us will be alive in the next 50 years to witness this? Remember, a lot of our grandparents tell us when they were a kid, they go to the corner store, they go to wherever they went and bought candy from. They buy almost a bag of candy for 1 penny. And look, this is from 1913. So let's check $1 in 1913 so we can actually solidify what our grandparents told us. Sorry, 1913. Let's check this. So now, if in 1913, if I purchased an item for $1, then in 2020, that same item will cost $26. That's crazy. Can you imagine one day paying $1 for something, then tomorrow is $26? This is a rate of 2,530.2%. This is crazy, family. This ain't good. This inflation, man. We entering hyperinflation. We getting away from the real value of things. And we just recently seen this, and a lot of people are not paying attention to it. We just recently seen this in Venezuela. Now you guys could do your own research on Venezuela. I'm not going to go too hard into Venezuela. But as you can see from this little article, it tells you it's marked by hyperinflation. Hyperinflation because of Hugo Chavez and his socialist ideology, his Marxism, led to the destruction of one of the most prosperous regions in South America. I want y'all to think about that for a minute. Catch y'all next time.